I never thought my life would change because of a confession whispered in an empty office. It started like any other late night at work, the hum of computers, the soft ticking of a clock, and the faint scent of his cologne that always lingered long after he left the room. He was my boss, confident, sharp, the kind of man everyone respected but no one truly knew. I admired him quietly, from the safe distance of professionalism. At least, I thought it was safe. But that night, when everyone else had gone home, I turned to find him standing behind me. His tie was loose, his eyes softer than I'd ever seen them. And then, without pretense or warning, he said the words that stopped the air in my lungs. "I can't keep pretending anymore. I'm in love with you." In that moment, time froze. Every boundary I'd built, every unspoken rule between us, they all vanished. I didn't know whether to step closer or run. Because love, especially this kind of love, wasn't supposed to exist here, between closed blinds and fluorescent lights, between power and vulnerability. Before I tell you what happened next, before you find out what I said to him, do one thing for me. Hit that subscribe button, because this story isn't just about love. It's about what happens when you're forced to choose between your heart and everything the world tells you is off limits. What he did after that confession changed everything. When I first started working for Daniel, I never thought he even noticed me. He was the kind of boss everyone talked about when he left the room. Sharp suits, calm voice, always in control. The kind of man who could make a whole room quiet just by walking in. I admired him from a distance like everyone else, but something about the way he carried himself, it stayed with me. At first, I told myself it was just respect, maybe a little fascination. But the truth was, there was something deeper, something that made me nervous every time he called my name. I worked in the marketing department of his firm, a small but successful company in downtown Chicago. Daniel wasn't just the boss, he was the reason the company existed. He built it from nothing, and people treated him like he was untouchable. Yet, whenever he spoke to me, his voice softened. It was subtle, but I noticed it, the way his eyes lingered a second too long, or how his tone dropped just slightly when he asked me questions. It started one night a few months after I was hired. Everyone had gone home except the two of us. I was finishing a campaign report when the lights flickered. "You're still here?" His voice came from behind me. I turned, startled. "Yeah, just finishing the numbers for the steward account." He smiled, a rare, small smile that didn't reach his eyes but felt genuine. "You work too hard." I laughed, trying to hide how his gaze made my stomach twist. "I could say the same about you." He tilted his head, almost amused. "Touché." I thought that was the end of it. But he didn't leave. Instead, he walked to the window and stared out at the city. "You ever wonder," he said after a moment, "what it costs to build something from the ground up?" I wasn't sure what to say. "I guess everything?" He looked back at me then, not like a boss, not like a mentor, but like a man who'd lost something he couldn't name. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Everything." I didn't understand what that meant until later. From that night on, something changed. He'd stop by my desk more often, ask questions about things he didn't need to know. He started remembering small details about me. How I took my coffee, the music I played while working, the fact that I hated cold weather but loved the way snow looked under streetlights. It wasn't just friendliness. It was something else. Something unspoken. One afternoon, we had to visit a client across town. The meeting ran late, and by the time we left, the sun had already set. The air was heavy with summer heat, and when he offered to drive me home, I didn't have the heart to refuse. The car ride was quiet at first. The city lights blurred against the windshield, and I could feel his eyes flicking toward me every now and then. I pretended not to notice. "You've been quiet," he finally said. "Just tired," I answered, even though I wasn't. He nodded, his jaw tightening. "You remind me of myself when I started. Always afraid to say the wrong thing." I glanced at him, half smiling. Maybe I'm just trying to stay out of trouble. His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You think talking to me is trouble?" My chest tightened. "I don't know. Maybe it could be." For a moment, he didn't say anything. Then, softly, "You might be right." Something in the air shifted after that. The silence wasn't awkward anymore, it was charged. Every second in that car felt like it could tip into something neither of us could take back. When he dropped me off, I thanked him and reached for the door handle, but he stopped me with one sentence. "You deserve to be seen, you know that?" I froze. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, like he wanted to say more but couldn't. Finally, he just said, "Most people don't notice the things that matter. You do." Before I could answer, he gave me a look I'll never forget, the kind that makes you feel both exposed and safe at the same time. Then he said goodnight and drove away. I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying that look, that tone, that impossible closeness. After that, things between us became complicated. The following weeks were full of moments that blurred the line between professional and personal. A lingering touch when he handed me a file. His hand brushing mine when we reached for the same pen. Once, our eyes met across the meeting room, and neither of us looked away until someone said his name. It was wrong. I knew that. He was my boss. He had a reputation to protect. And yet, when we were alone, that boundary started to dissolve like it never existed. Then came the night of the company's anniversary party. The office was transformed with music, champagne, and laughter. Daniel looked more relaxed than I'd ever seen him, but his eyes kept finding mine. Every time they did, I felt something inside me stir, a silent acknowledgement that we were both pretending nothing was happening. When the night ended and the crowd thinned out, I went back to my desk to grab my jacket. He appeared again, like he always did, when no one else was around. "Good job tonight," he said. "Thank you." I smiled, nervous. "You too." He chuckled softly. "You think I did well?" "I think you always do." His expression changed then, something softer, more vulnerable. He stepped closer, close enough for me to smell the faint hint of whiskey on his breath. "You really believe that?" "Yes," I said quietly. He looked down at me, his voice barely above a whisper. "Then why do I feel like I'm falling apart every time you're near?" My heart stopped. I didn't know what to say. The words caught in my throat. Before I could answer, he reached out, brushing a strand of hair from my forehead. His touch was light, hesitant, but it burned like fire. Then he stepped back, exhaling shakily. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice rough. "I shouldn't have said that." He turned to leave, but I caught his wrist. "Daniel?" He stopped. The look in his eyes said everything he couldn't. We didn't say another word. The silence was louder than anything. And in that moment, I realized the truth. Whatever was happening between us wasn't going away. It was only beginning. The Monday after the party felt different. The office was the same desks, same hum of keyboards, same smell of coffee and printer ink, but Daniel wasn't. I could feel it before I even saw him. There was a shift in the air, like something unspoken had settled between us that no one else could see. When I walked into the conference room for the morning meeting, he was already there, reviewing papers. His sleeves were rolled up, his tie hung loose, and when his eyes met mine, it was as if the noise in the room disappeared. I tried to look away, but he didn't. "Morning," he said, his voice calm but softer than usual. "Morning," I replied, forcing a smile that felt too tight. We both knew what we were doing, pretending. Pretending that the moment in the office hallway on Friday night hadn't happened. Pretending that his words, "I feel like I'm falling apart every time you're near," weren't echoing in both our heads. Throughout the day, I avoided his office. Every time I saw his door open, I found a reason to stay at my desk. But by late afternoon, a message appeared on my screen. "Daniel, can you come to my office? Need to discuss the report." I hesitated before typing back. "Sure." When I entered, he was standing by the window again, looking out at the city like he always did when something was bothering him. The skyline glowed with the last colors of sunset, and for a second he didn't even notice I was there. "You wanted to see me?" I asked. He turned, and the look in his eyes hit me like a wave, that mix of authority and something dangerously close to longing. "Yes," he said, gesturing toward the papers on his desk. "About the Stewart account. You handled it well. I wanted to thank you personally." I blinked, unsure if that was really all. "Thank me?" "Yes." He paused, stepping closer. "And apologize." "For what?" For Friday. His voice was lower now. For saying something I shouldn't have. I swallowed hard. You don't have to apologize. I do, he said firmly, but his gaze betrayed him. His eyes lingered, scanning my face, my expression. You work for me. I crossed a line. I took a slow breath. Maybe we both did. The silence that followed was thick, heavy. Outside, a distant siren wailed, and the fading light painted gold streaks across his face. He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. You make it hard to stay detached. My heart pounded. Maybe you shouldn't try so hard. He froze. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then, almost without realizing, he stepped closer until there was barely a foot of space between us. I could feel the heat of him, the faint trace of his cologne, the tension radiating from every inch of his body. You don't understand, he said, voice trembling just slightly. If people knew, if anyone found out. They won't, I cut in. I'm not saying anything. That's not the point. His hand brushed against mine. Not enough to be intentional, not enough to be innocent. You deserve better than to get caught in my mess. I don't want better, I said quietly. I just want honesty. Something broke in his expression, the wall he kept up, the distance he always maintained. He stared at me for what felt like forever, and then he said, almost a whisper, you really have no idea what you're doing to me. He reached for my face then, slowly, as if giving me time to pull away. I didn't. His thumb grazed my jaw, his fingers trembling slightly against my skin. Daniel, I breathed, but I didn't finish. Because in the next second, he kissed me. It wasn't rushed or desperate. It was careful, restrained, a kiss that spoke of everything we weren't allowed to say out loud. The world seemed to fall away, the ticking clock, the city outside, the rules we were breaking. It was just him and me, suspended in a silence that felt infinite. When he finally pulled back, his forehead rested against mine. I shouldn't have done that, he whispered. I know, I said softly. But I'm glad you did. He let out a shaky laugh, the kind that sounded more like surrender than relief. This can't happen again. I wanted to believe him, but the look in his eyes told another story. The next days were torture. Every meeting, every glance, every accidental touch was laced with that memory. I could feel it, the tension growing, the unspoken pull tightening between us. Then came the business trip. It was supposed to be simple, 2 days in Boston to pitch a new client. Just work. But the moment we checked into the hotel, I knew it wouldn't be. There was only one room left with a suite upgrade, and Daniel insisted I take it. You need to rest, he said, avoiding my eyes. But later that night, when a storm hit and thunder shook the windows, there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find him standing there, shirt unbuttoned at the collar, eyes dark and conflicted. The power's out in my room, he said. Can I wait here until it comes back? I hesitated, just for a moment, before stepping aside. Yeah. Sure. He sat on the couch, running a hand through his hair. This feels wrong. Then why are you here? I asked quietly. He looked at me then, really looked, and something in him broke. Because I can't stay away from you. The storm outside roared as if echoing his words. I sat beside him, my pulse racing. Then stop fighting it, I said. He turned, his face inches from mine, and for a moment we just breathed, two men caught between what they wanted and what they feared. When he kissed me again, it wasn't gentle this time. It was raw, desperate, like a dam finally giving way. We didn't speak after. The rain kept falling, lightning flashing through the room as if marking the moment we both stopped pretending. That night, everything changed. And in the silence after the storm, I knew we'd crossed a line neither of us could ever return from. The morning after the storm felt like waking up in another world. The air inside the hotel suite was heavy, quiet, filled with the kind of silence that follows something you can't take back. I sat at the edge of the bed, still half in disbelief that it had actually happened. That he had been here, Daniel, my boss, my secret, the man I'd thought was untouchable. He was gone by sunrise. No note, no message. Just the faint scent of his cologne lingering on the pillow beside me, and the memory of his hands gripping my shoulders like he was trying to convince himself I was real. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at the rain-streaked window. Part of me wanted to feel guilty, but I didn't. I felt alive. So, the way he'd looked at me wasn't like anyone ever had before. But beneath that warmth, there was something else: fear. Because now, there were no excuses left. When I walked into the hotel lobby a few hours later, I spotted him near the elevator. He was talking to the client, perfectly composed, his expression unreadable. Our eyes met for the briefest second, just enough to remind me that it hadn't been a dream, and then he looked away. That hurt more than I expected. We flew back to Chicago that evening, barely exchanging words. I told myself it was for the best, that he needed space, that maybe he regretted it. But when he brushed past me in the aisle of the plane, his fingers lightly touched mine, like a secret apology. It lasted less than a heartbeat, but it was enough. Back at the office, everything returned to normal, at least on the surface. But I knew things weren't the same. He called me into his office less often now, and when he did, he kept the door wide open. His tone was colder, professional to the point of cruelty. It was like he was trying to build a wall between us brick by brick. I should have been relieved, but instead, it tore me apart. One night, after everyone had left, I was still at my desk when I heard the faint sound of a door closing. I looked up and saw Daniel standing there, his jacket slung over his arm, his face unreadable. "Still working late?" he asked quietly. "Guess so," I said, closing my laptop. "Trying to catch up." He nodded slowly. "You don't have to prove yourself anymore, you know. That's not what I'm doing." He hesitated, then walked closer. "Then what are you doing?" I looked up at him. "Trying to figure out if you're going to pretend that night never happened." His jaw tightened. "It can't happen again." "Why not?" "You know why." He exhaled sharply. "I built my entire career on discipline, on keeping control. You think I can risk that? Risk you?" I stood, my heart pounding. "I didn't ask you to risk anything. I just want you to be honest." He shook his head, voice cracking slightly. "If I'm honest, I'll ruin us both." We stood there, inches apart, the air electric and unbearable. Then, without warning, he reached out, his hand finding the back of my neck, pulling me closer until our foreheads touched. "You make me forget who I'm supposed to be," he whispered. "Maybe that's not a bad thing," I said. He let out a shaky breath, then stepped back, his control snapping back into place like armor. "Go home," he said softly. "Please." I did. But sleep never came. Over the next few days, we both tried to pretend again. But pretending only made it worse. The tension grew like pressure in a sealed room, until it finally broke. It was Friday afternoon when everything fell apart. We were in a meeting with a new investor, a retired colonel named Frank Wallace. Halfway through the presentation, Frank turned to me and said something about young blood bringing fresh ideas. I smiled politely, but when I glanced at Daniel, I froze. He was looking at me the way he used to, that mix of pride and something softer he couldn't hide. The colonel noticed. After the meeting, as soon as the door closed, Daniel turned on me. "You have to be more careful," he said sharply. "Careful?" I snapped. "I didn't do anything." "People notice things," he said, pacing. "The way you look at me. The way He stopped himself. "You can't make this harder than it already is." "Harder?" I stepped closer. "You mean real?" He looked at me then, eyes burning. "You think this is easy for me? Every time I see you, every time I hear your voice?" He stopped again, shaking his head. "I can't think straight." "Then stop pretending," I said, my voice trembling. "Stop acting like you don't feel what I do." He stared at me, breathing hard. "You don't know what I've sacrificed to get here. Maybe you've sacrificed too much." The words hit him like a slap. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said quietly, "You should leave." I hesitated, then turned toward the door. But before I left, I looked back. "You can keep lying to yourself, Daniel. But you can't lie to me. Not anymore." That weekend, he didn't call. He didn't text. Monday came, and he didn't show up at work. I tried to focus on my tasks, but worry ate at me. By Tuesday, I couldn't stand it anymore. I went to his apartment, something I swore I'd never do. When he opened the door, he looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days. "What are you doing here?" he asked softly. "You weren't at work." I was worried. He sighed. "You shouldn't be here." "Then tell me to leave," I said. He didn't. Instead, he ran a hand through his hair and stepped aside. "Fine. Come in." The apartment was quiet, half-lit, papers scattered on the coffee table. I could see the tension in his shoulders as he sat down. "I thought if I stayed away, it would get easier," he said finally. But it didn't. It just got worse. I took a seat across from him. "Then maybe stop running." He looked up at me, eyes raw, vulnerable. "You really don't understand what this means, do you? If this gets out, I lose everything." I reached across the table, my hand brushing his. "Maybe you'd gain something else." He didn't pull away. Instead, he whispered, "You make me want things I told myself I didn't need anymore." I smiled faintly. "Then maybe it's time you stop fighting yourself." He leaned forward, his voice barely audible. "And if I can't?" "Then I'll wait," I said. "As long as it takes." His eyes softened, the first real sign of surrender. He reached for my hand fully this time, holding it tight. In that quiet apartment, surrounded by everything he thought he had to protect, Daniel finally let go, not completely, not yet, but enough to let me see the man beneath the control. Enough to make me believe that maybe, just maybe, he was starting to believe too. End of chapter 3, 900 words. It had been a week since that night in Daniel's apartment, the night something inside him finally cracked open. He hadn't said the words out loud, not yet, but I could feel it every time he looked at me. There was less distance now, less pretending. Still, we moved carefully, like two men walking across thin ice. In the office, we were ghosts of ourselves. We spoke only when necessary, never alone for too long, never with the door closed. But beneath every polite exchange was the memory of his hand wrapped around mine, the quiet promise he made without saying a word. Then came the dinner party. Every year, the company hosted a fundraiser for the Veterans Relief Program. It was Daniel's way of giving back, something deeply personal for him since his brother had served overseas. This year, he asked me to help coordinate it. I tried not to read into it, but when he said, "I trust you with this," the way he looked at me said more than the words ever could. The event took place at the Langford Hotel Ballroom, all gold lights, soft jazz, and champagne flutes. Everyone was there, board members, clients, even a few local officials. Daniel arrived late as always, dressed in a black suit that made him look like he'd stepped out of a dream. When our eyes met across the room, I forgot how to breathe. He walked over to greet a group of investors, all smiles and firm handshakes, but his gaze never drifted far. I tried to focus on my work, making sure everything ran smoothly, but it was useless. Every time I turned around, he was there, hovering at the edge of my vision. At one point, as I was checking the silent auction table, he came up behind me and said quietly, "You did an amazing job tonight." I turned, startled by how close he was. "Thanks. You clean up pretty well yourself." He smiled, that small, private smile he reserved only for me. "I wanted to tell you earlier, but..." His eyes flicked toward the crowd. "You know." I nodded. "Yeah, I know." But as we stood there, one of the board members, a woman named Veronica, called his name from across the room. Daniel stepped back quickly, his composure snapping into place. "Later," he said under his breath before walking away. The rest of the night passed in slow motion. I watched him charm donors, laugh at jokes, play the perfect host. To anyone else, he was just Daniel, confident, untouchable, flawless. But I saw the truth in his eyes when no one else was looking. The exhaustion, the longing, the fear. And that's when everything went wrong. Around 10, as the crowd began to thin out, I went backstage to collect the event files. The hallway was quiet until I heard voices. Daniel's voice. "I don't know what you're talking about," he was saying, his tone clipped, defensive. Then another voice, lower and colder. "Come on, Daniel. You really think people don't notice?" It was Alan, his oldest friend and vice president of the company. "Notice what?" Daniel said, but there was tension in his voice now. The way you look at him, Alan replied. That new kid. The one from marketing. Don't insult me by pretending it's nothing. My heart dropped. I froze just around the corner, listening, pulse pounding. You're out of line, Daniel said sharply. Am I? Alan's voice softened, but not kindly. You've built this company with your reputation. One wrong move, and everything falls apart. I'm not judging, Daniel, but you need to be careful. The world's not kind to men like us, especially when one of them signs our paychecks. There was silence. Then Daniel said quietly, You don't know what you're talking about. Alan laughed bitterly. Maybe not. But I do know this. If the board catches wind of anything, it won't just be you they go after. They'll destroy him too. I stepped back, trying not to make a sound, my throat tight. When I finally dared to look again, Alan was gone. Daniel was leaning against the wall, eyes closed, breathing hard. He looked like a man about to break. I wanted to go to him. I wanted to tell him that none of it mattered, that I didn't care what people thought. But I didn't. Not yet. The next morning he called me into his office. The door was open, as always, but his tone was different, colder again, distant. We need to talk, he said. My chest tightened. About what? About what happened. He wouldn't look at me. It has to stop. I felt my stomach drop. Is this about Alan? His jaw twitched. He didn't say anything if that's what you're asking. But he's not wrong. Whatever this is, it can't go on. I stepped closer. Daniel, listen to yourself. You're scared, that's all. Scared. He looked up sharply. You think this is about fear? This is about survival. About everything I've worked for. I shook my head. And what about everything we've already lost, pretending this doesn't mean anything? He exhaled, gripping the edge of his desk. You don't understand the world I live in. People like me don't get second chances. I took another step. Then maybe it's time to make one. He closed his eyes, pained. You're too young to know what that costs. Then teach me, I said quietly. Let me stand beside you. For a moment, I thought he might reach for me. But instead, he said, leave before someone sees you in here. The words hit me harder than I expected. I hesitated, then turned toward the door. You can push me away all you want, I said softly. But it won't change what's already true. And then I left. The days that followed were unbearable. He barely looked at me, spoke to me only through short emails. The distance felt worse than rejection. It felt like erasure. Then one night, I found an envelope on my desk. Inside was a handwritten note. Meet me at the marina. Midnight. No signature. But I didn't need one. When I arrived, the docks were empty except for Daniel standing by the water, the moonlight glinting off the waves. He turned as I approached, his face unreadable. I thought you didn't want to be seen with me, I said quietly. I don't, he replied. But I can't seem to stop. He took a step closer. The wind off the lake carried his voice, low and raw. I'm tired of living scared. Then don't, I whispered. He reached out, his hand brushing mine, tentative, trembling. If I fall, I need to know you'll be there. I will, I said. Always. For the first time, he didn't fight it. He pulled me close, his forehead against mine, his voice breaking as he said, then maybe it's time I stop hiding. The night around us was still, the city lights distant, the air thick with everything we'd been afraid to say. And in that fragile silence, I realized this wasn't just about love anymore. It was about freedom. The morning it all fell apart began like any other. The city was quiet beneath a heavy fog, and I arrived at the office early, coffee in hand, heart still carrying the echo of Daniel's voice from that night at the marina. Maybe it's time I stop hiding. For the first time in weeks, I felt light. Hopeful. He came in just after me, looking more alive than I'd seen him in months. There was still tension in his shoulders, but when our eyes met, a tiny, unspoken smile passed between us. A secret hello. I didn't know it then, but it would be the last quiet moment we'd have together. Around 10, the door to his office burst open. It was Alan. His face was pale, furious. You need to see this, he said, tossing a folder onto Daniel's desk. Daniel frowned. What's going on? An email, Alan said, his voice shaking. Someone leaked photos. I froze. Photos. Daniel opened the folder, and I saw his expression collapse. The tight jaw, the flicker of disbelief, the way his hand trembled as he turned the pages. There they were. At the marina. Standing too close, his hand on mine. Another one. Him pulling me in, his forehead resting against my temple. The world seemed to spin. Who did this? Daniel asked, his voice quiet, dangerous. Alan shook his head. Doesn't matter. What matters is that the board already has it. They called an emergency meeting for this afternoon. He looked between us, pity and disappointment blending in his eyes. I told you to be careful, he said softly and left. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I could hear the clock ticking, my own heart pounding in my chest. Daniel finally looked at me. It's over, he said flatly. Don't say that. He laughed bitterly. What else am I supposed to say? They'll ruin me. Everything. Then let them, I said, stepping closer. Let them see who you really are. You don't understand, he snapped. This company isn't just a job. It's my life. My reputation. My name. I swallowed hard. And what about your truth, Daniel? What about us? He looked at me for a long moment, torn, scared, angry. Then he whispered, there is no us. Not anymore. It felt like being punched. I tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. He turned away, running a hand through his hair. You need to go. Please. I stood there for another second, searching his face for any sign that he didn't mean it. But all I saw was a man cornered by his own fear. So I left. The next few hours blurred together. I sat in the park across the street, watching people walk by, pretending the world hadn't just split in half. Rain began to fall, light at first, then harder, the kind of cold, soaking rain that seeps into your bones. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from Daniel. Come back, please. When I returned, the building was almost empty. The lights in his office were still on. I walked in and he was there, no jacket, sleeves rolled up, his face pale and tired. They fired me, he said simply. I froze. What? They called it resignation, to save face. Effective immediately. He laughed softly, the sound hollow. It's over. I walked closer. Daniel? He looked up then, and for the first time since I'd known him, he didn't look like a boss, or a leader, or a man in control. He looked human. Broken. I kept thinking if I just played the part long enough, maybe I could forget, he said. Forget who I am. Forget what I want. But then you showed up. He stepped forward, closing the distance between us. And suddenly I couldn't hide anymore. My throat tightened. You don't have to. He shook his head, tears glinting in his eyes. But I did. I hurt you. Pushed you away. And for what? To protect a lie. Then stop protecting it, I whispered. Let it go. He stared at me for a long moment, the silence stretching, raw and trembling, and then he pulled me in. The kiss wasn't gentle this time. It was desperate, full of everything we'd lost and everything we still wanted to believe could be saved. When we finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine. You deserve someone who isn't afraid, he said softly. I deserve the truth, I replied. And you just gave it to me. He laughed through the tears. You really think we can start over? I nodded. Not as boss and employee, just as us. He smiled faintly. Us. We left the building together that night. No plan, no titles, just two men walking out into the rain, the city lights reflecting on the wet pavement. People stared, maybe recognizing him, maybe not, but for once, he didn't care. At the corner, he stopped, looking back at the building that had defined him for years. You know, he said, his voice calm, I always thought success meant control, power, respect. And now? I asked. He looked at me, his eyes soft. Now I think it means freedom. The rain kept falling, soaking us both. He reached out, taking my hand openly, no more hiding, no more shame. The world around us blurred, but for the first time, I saw him clearly. Not the man who led board meetings or hid behind polished smiles, but Daniel, the man who finally chose to live. As we walked toward the glow of the city, I felt something shift inside me too. For months, I'd been searching for who I was through his eyes, through every glance, every hesitation, every moment of stolen connection. But now, as the storm passed and dawn began to rise, I realized the truth. Love wasn't about being seen by someone else. It was about daring to be seen together. When we reached the next block, Daniel stopped again, turning to face me. His voice was low, steady. "I don't know what happens next." I smiled. "Then let's find out." He squeezed my hand, and we kept walking, two men who had nothing left to hide, stepping into whatever came next. The world didn't collapse. The sky didn't fall. But something far greater happened. We stopped living in fear. And in that moment, under the fading storm, I knew one thing for certain. Sometimes love isn't what saves you. Sometimes it's what finally sets you free.